what you do now. I still go, they call you my boo. When I go, they hold you down forever and ever. I love you anyway. Don't love you anyway. 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 You say you the one boy, baby hot stepper. I do a blanye, I get looked up. Listen to your judging, no be improper. Near that I fuck with John, no what time I jogger. Whoa. I'm a tana pomona. Look at blow, but we get the formula. What's this love for now? Look at blow, but we get the formula. Couple of your friends, I mean, no, they like me. Pretend say them friends to me, but don't fight me. I believe just for you, but you know, see. I believe just for you, but you know, see. Now I see, say your mind all day for me. Now I see, say you really know the mind. No matter what you do now, I still go, they call you my boo. When I go, they hold you down forever and ever. No matter what you do now, I still go, they call you my boo. When I go, they hold you down.
That's right, it's Adam Kelvin Boy and Darko Vibes. Love you here on Joy 99.7 FM. Drive time on Joy with Lexus Bill, Adam's new vibe. Love it. Go get him. Here on your superstation Joy 99.7 FM. So I was telling you earlier about tomorrow's big showdown on Joy 99.7 FM. We're bringing you two of Ghana's finest high life artists. Yeah, two of my favorites as well. Guys, are you ready for this? Tomorrow, it's Mr. All For Real. Yeah, Oforian Ponsa versus
collaborate and listen.
Mr. Kwabna. Oh my God. Who are you with? Kwabna or All For Real? Charlie, we've got a ton of their songs we'll be sharing with you tomorrow on Joy 99.7 FM. 2 o'clock, I'm going to be here with the team of them nights here. Philip Naya, Beku Sankofi, Sonofori, Anita Mirabel. I'm Lexus Bill. Evans Mensah is coming up with Top Story. Let's continue the conversation. Let's actually start the conversation on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Our hashtag is Drive on Joy. I'm Lexus Bill. Have a great evening.
Tonight, Speaker of Parliament issues 48-hour ultimatum to Communications Minister to show up in the House to respond to questions on controversial $89 million Kelly GVG contract.
I'm worried about these questions. This is the third time the minister has failed to appear before the House.
We're live in Parliament where there have been confessions by the leadership of the House revealing how MPs are destroying the work of Parliament through lack of integrity and sheer incompetence of doing the actual business of legislating. And Top Story is always brought to you by Gasim Cement, the nation building Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready. My name is Evans Mensah. There's a lot happening in Parliament today, from confessions by the leadership of the House revealing how members of Parliament are destroying the work of Parliament through lack of integrity and sheer incompetence of doing the actual business of legislation. We're going to go into that very shortly. But first, in the last few minutes, the Speaker of Parliament, Professor Michael Quay, has issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Communications Minister Esla Owusu-Ekufo to show up in the House to respond to questions on the controversial Kelly GVG contract after she failed to appear on 3 separate occasions. Ningo Prampram MP Samuel George has posed the questions to the minister on the $89 million deal meant to monitor revenue mobilization by the mobile telecoms company. You recall that had been a subject of some great controversy, with civil society organizations opposing the deal, raising questions of possible abuse of state resources. Well, today, when the time for her to answer, I'm talking about the communications minister, to answer the question was due, Majority Leader Evans Mensah, who told the House he simply could not find the minister.
Unfortunately, I've been trying to locate the minister. Unfortunately, I'm not getting able to touch base with her. She could come, and when she comes, they will be following the order of business and allow the minister to come and respond to the questions. Put that as a responsibility. The Speaker of the House exists to ensure this, and indeed it is one of our oversight responsibilities. I agree that we should pursue this matter to the legitimate conclusion, except that I'm not sure that anybody can impute any motives to the minister. This is a minister who is capable of answering questions, even on the spur of the moment. Mr. Speaker, so I'll plead that we wait for her. If we don't succeed today, if she's not in today, certainly tomorrow or Friday, we may get if the responses are available to her to come and respond to the questions.
So that is Chairman Sabunsu. He's the minority leader pleading for the House to give her some time. But we heard today from the minority Chief Whip Muntaka Mubarak, who complained the minister's non-appearances simply untenable, and she could not simply be giving time in perpetuity to appear when she refused to do so. Listen to Muntaka Mubarak.
I'm worried about these questions. This is the third time the minister has failed to appear before the House. Mr. Speaker, you will notice that even the answers has not been provided. This is the third time. Speaker, I don't want to impugn wrong motive to say it's deliberate the minister is avoiding to ask this question. We have a responsibility as a House to get ministers to be accountable to this House. And Mr. Speaker, this is the third time. The first time she was not here, there was no answer. It was rescheduled. The second time, the same. And today, the same, without even the answers. So I hope you give the right directive so that the minister will come and answer this question necessarily without further delay.
Well, the Speaker agreed with the minority view and issued the following directive.
had a letter delivered on Monday that she will not be able, for circumstances beyond her control, to be here this morning. Nevertheless, I notice that no answer has been placed on the record. To cut a long story short, I direct that the minister must answer all the relevant questions and make herself available on Friday to answer the relevant questions. Thank you very much.
I want to take you to my parliamentary correspondent, Joseph Apokugapo, who joins us on the telephone line right now. Joseph, so is it that still, as of now, the House still hasn't got any clarity as to why the communications minister has failed to honor the invitation on 3 separate occasions?
Well, it's not exactly clear. The last time, the indication we're getting is that she indicated in a letter to the House that it was due to circumstances beyond her control. She couldn't actually show up in the House to come respond to the question. And then it was moved to today as well. And then the indication is that she couldn't actually come in. The Kermit GVG question is actually just one of 2 different questions that she is supposed to answer. So there are 2 questions from Samuel George directed at her. The first one, and just to quote that question very quickly, it says to ask the Minister for Communications how much incremental revenue has been made by Kermit GVG in the past years. Because you recall that when this controversy was brewing a few years ago, Samuel George and the civil society groups were insisting that this said company, when they are contracted and paid the said $89 million, would not make any difference in terms of the expected tax revenue from the telecommunications companies. And it's like that's what, about 2 years down the line, Mr. George wants to get to the bottom of and get the minister to provide evidence that the said company's engagement has resulted in an increment in the revenue. And then there's a second question that's also coming from Mr. George to the minister to ask her the status of the National Data Center after the commercialization agreement that allowed for that. That's actually the second question. But of course, the Kelly GVG one is actually the main one that everyone is looking for. It's when today she wasn't around to respond to that. Interestingly, the majority leader, Evans Mensah himself, didn't have an indication of where she was, for which she was unable to respond to the question, and him indicating that he had tried to locate her and hadn't been able to locate her, and that's that in the course of the day, when she shows up, then she will be asked to respond to the question. But eventually, she's not been in the House, and the Speaker says Friday is the day that she must show up without fail to respond to those questions. Okay, so just for clarity, the first question has to do with, in essence, how much has the Kelly GVG through his contract managed to, in terms of the accumulation, because this is about revenue mobilization, the quantum over the period. Yes, correct. So the question Mr. George wants to get a sense of is how much money the nation has been able to save thanks to the engagement of Kelly GVG, which is actually the prime reason government gave for wanting to engage the company to actually get this work done. Because again, on the floor of Parliament, you recall when the debate first arose, Mr. George and members on the minority side had insisted that in terms of doing the necessary vetting of the expected revenue, which this company, we are told, will be doing, the minority argued that this is something that the Ghana Revenue Authority could have done without having to engage a private firm and pay them the said $89 million to do that. So Mr. George wants to see evidence of the fact that the third implementation of this contract has actually brought in those expected returns. And then the second question has to do with the National Data Center. But the main one that's been pending and hasn't been answered over the 3 different durations is particularly that which has to do with Kelly GVG. And for the MPs on the minority side, they think that Madam Esleuso Kuful is not showing up to respond to the question because she probably is worried about relations will come up after she discloses the details on this. They are convinced that the situation with the engagement of the company hasn't made any positive impact on the revenues, which is how come they think that the minister is not ready to actually show up to respond to the questions in question.
Okay, Joseph, thank you very much. Thankfully, Mrs. George, who was asked that question, joins us on the telephone line right now. Mr. George, thank you for your time here on Top Story. And just a little bit of background to this, if you just waking up to the KNGBG controversy. Imani Africa had been the civil society think tank. They've been at it for a while, pushing government, raising questions about that particular contract. And they had recently questioned why government is paying out $1.5 million every month, they claim, for no work done to this particular company. Now, the government awarded this 10-year contract worth $178 million to KNGBG to help block revenue losses in the telecommunication sector and Singbox fraud. The argument being that this is a duplication and that's the work that has already been done by the existing state institutions. Mr. George joins us on the telephone line. Mr. George, how long ago did you file that initial question?
I filed, and good evening to your listeners, George. I filed the questions as an urgent question demanding a written and an oral response on the 25th of May, 2020.
Okay.
So my questions were filed at the Clerk of Parliament's office on the 25th of May. It normally will go through a process to the Speaker for his admittance, and then after the Speaker admits it, then the question is conveyed to the Minister. Those processes have been completed. I believe that today is the third time the questions have appeared on the other paper. Last week, it appeared on the other paper. The Minister was not in the chamber to answer the question, and it was rescheduled to today. Last week, my understanding from the Ministry was that the Minister said she had not gotten the responses yet from the requisite agencies. And my understanding, or my belief with my knowledge of the Ministry, will be that the question on KNGBG would require some responses from the National Communications Authority, and then the questions on the National Data Center would require some inputs from the National IT Agency, NITA. It is surprising to me that since the 25th of May and up till now, those two agencies are not in a position to provide information that should be readily available. But the Speaker has ruled. He says that Friday the Minister must appear and answer the questions, because you see, it would have been one thing if the questions had the answers had appeared on the other paper and the Minister was not present. That would have been considered as a response being provided, and what I may have lost would have been my opportunity of follow-up. But in this instance, no responses have actually been provided to Parliament whatsoever. And I don't think that these are major issues. I believe that and just to clarify, my question is not on revenues by KNGBG. My question is specific to incremental revenue, because so we would want to see what was and what has been, and I believe that this is information that should be readily available, and it would help us. And the reason I'm asking this is not even for any mischief or malice purposes. When at the point in time where government revenues have been hit thanks to COVID-19. The communication sector is one area that has not been hit by COVID. In fact, the communication sector across the world is the sector that is actually doing so well under COVID, because a lot of meetings are now digital. And so there's a lot more data that's being driven. And so the telcos the MNOs are actually making a windfall this year. KNGBG is supposed to be the revenue generation or assurance mechanism by government. And for me, I just wanted to see how much more money they're making for the state, so that the government can continue its interventions like free SHS, like all the various interventions for the presidency.
And you say you qualify to say incremental savings. I guess comparing
those were the exact words in my question. I wanted to see how much incremental revenue over the past year has accrued to the state from KNGBG's operations.
Okay, good. Is it safe to assume that, I mean, embedded in the, I guess, spirit in that question is a sneaky suspicion that the concerns you had raised before KNGBG, which was a big controversy when it was first, initiated, that your sneaky suspicion is that the position you expressed, as saying this wasn't necessary, may possibly be borne out if the answers are provided, that you believe KNGBG actually had not done much in terms of the assurances we were told. Is that the
Evans, I don't want to engage in conjecture. KNGBG is a corporate entity. They are a legal entity, a company doing their business. I would not want to make any comments at this point in time that would impugn any wrongdoing on their part or any lack of competence on their part. My question is specific to the minister, not even to Kelani GBG. It's the minister responsible for communication to come and answer questions specific to incremental revenue. When her answers are given, we will then be in a better position to interrogate any other anecdotal issues. But for now, I do not want to speak to the competence or otherwise of Kelani GBG or that contract. I believe that this question and its subsequent answer would afford us the opportunity to have those conversations. But at this point in time, I think it will be unfair to the company. And again, I am in no position to say that the company has not or is responsible for the minister's lack of response. I mean, that is her responsibility with her agency, the NTA, not the company. So on this one, the responsibility lies with the minister, not the company.
Okay.
And so I have no qualms with the company at this point.
Just to check, though, because this was such a big deal in the positions that you articulated on this, of course, as a notable member of the Communications Committee in Parliament, you still stand by them, correct?
Absolutely. There are questions about the Kelani GBG operations. There are questions that need to be answered. There were several questions that were raised. Questions about the procurement procedure, questions about whether it is the best, whether there was value for money done. In Parliament, we were told that the value for money for the contract that was signed in 2017 was the value for money that was done in 2009. I mean, all those questions are still legitimate questions that have not been answered. But again, in Parliament, the rules and procedures in Parliament bind you to specificity. So I have asked a specific question. If the minister appears on Friday and answers those questions, and I raise questions about value for money, the speaker will rule me out of order, because those questions are not the questions for which the minister has been summoned to appear before Parliament. And so that's why I'm saying that I don't want to, because this is a parliamentary procedure, I do not want to befuddle it. It's not a public conversation or a media conversation. It's parliamentary work, and it's specific to incremental revenue. And that's why I'm trying to restrain myself to issues involving incremental revenue relative to Kelani GBG.
Well, I'm grateful. That is George there. The minister has the 48-hour ultimatum issued today by the Speaker of Parliament for her, the Communications Minister, Madam Eslawusu Kufu, to appear and answer these questions. We'll see what she says. If she appears and honest that this is not an invitation, this is actually an ultimatum for her. The question is really, what can the Speaker do if she does not necessarily appear? I wonder that. Let me put that question to the Minority Chief Whip very quickly, because I heard him raise questions about the minister's failure to persistently appear. Muntaka Mubarak is on the line with me right now. Mr. Mubarak, thank you for time here on Top Story. I'm just curious, the speaker was clear Friday, this 48 hours, the minister must appear, but what can he really do? Because 3 times already, as you've articulated on the floor today, she failed to appear. Does Parliament have any powers to sanction or reprimand if that happens? Just curious.
Well, I mean, good evening to you and your listeners. There are a number of things that can happen. I mean, my colleague, the Communication Minister, Ursula, I want to believe, will definitely be there on Friday for an answer. I mean, we've not had an incident where a speaker summons a minister and the minister, he or she refuses the summon. I mean, the person may come with some other excuse or some other reasons, or either ill health or not having other challenges, but definitely the person will appear. Failure to do that comes with a number of things. One, if you check our constitution, there could be censure by the House. If we can get a majority of the House to censure the minister, I mean, the president will have no any other option but to remove the minister. I mean, we've not done that since the Fourth Republic. We came into this constitutional era. We have not had that. I mean, there are a number of things that could happen. I mean, failure to come, even though she's a member of Parliament, could be obstructing the work of Parliament, and that could be a privileged matter. She could be referred to the Privileges Committee. And I know there are many issues, but I can assure you, I mean, since I came to the House, I've not seen one incident where the Speaker, instructs a minister or summons a minister or any other agency head to appear before Parliament, and that agency head or minister, he or she refuses to appear. So So I'm very hopeful that she will appear. I mean, she is one minister. I mean, to be fair to her, council parliament more regularly. I just didn't understand why, in this instance, she had to fail to come to the house on 3 different occasions to answer these questions. I've had many times raised these concerns on the house, and one of them who is most guilty is the Minister of Finance. I mean, when leadership in 2018 met His Excellency the President, I mean, if you ask on the Flaster House, they will tell you it was one of the things that I raised very strongly with the President. The President did promise me and promise the leadership that we will see change to this. He was going to definitely instruct his ministers to appear before the House. Later, I heard in cabinet he really instructed them, but still, many of them don't. They don't come, and the worst culprit is the finance minister. Most of the times, his business are done by others. Even today, one of his business has to be led by the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs, and many other ministers most of the time do not appear before the House. They will either send deputies or sometimes some other ministers who do their business for them, which I have always said is a very terrible, bad,
I mean, coincidentally, talking about ministers not attending to the House, there have been some very interesting revelations that yourself, the majority leader and the minority leader have been making today, not about ministers but about the MPs yourselves, and some very interesting confessions by the leadership today. For example, that apparently, and there are various accounts of this, you know, only 10, less than 10, that's a majority, minority leader saying, only you can count less than 10 of the MPs who can actually do the work of dealing with the bills and legislation before committees. And Muntaka Mubarak himself says he can't count more than 100 MPs who actually get into the House and do the business. Just listen to a brief of these 3 key points from the leadership, and I'll come back to Muntaka Mubarak about, so what does this mean for this parliament that we have with 275 MPs that you can count more than 100 actually doing the job?
We are destroying this house. I'm actually, this house is completely turned upside down. And quote me anyway, and I can provide evidence to that. 275 members of parliament, you can't put your hand on 100 MPs who are doing the work of parliamentarians. You can't. 100 out of 275. It is so difficult. I mean, all of us here, we lament on the chamber. You come to a house where you want to build integrity, and people do not come to the house, and they get others to sign their name for them. You come to the chamber and you see all of you in the chamber are less than 80. The next day you look at the vote of proceedings, it says 150 members were in the house. The house is losing it.
Even when it comes to legislative drafting, I cannot count more than 6 to 10 members of parliament, particularly even the young ones that you call newcomers. I probably can narrow to only 5 newcomers who are interested in the rudiments of lawmaking daily. Now, if it comes to statements, 5 have gone too far.
So you had there, heard Adrisu, and of course Muntaka Mubarak, who still will be on the line. Mr. Mubarak, this is pretty shocking. And the majority side also agrees with it, because the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs also makes his own pronouncements on this matter. But I'm curious, what is it that, clearly if all the leadership agree that this is going on, we haven't seen any sanctions. I mean, Odikro had been at this for a while. Sometimes even those MPs, when they are named and shamed, they go attacking. But clearly it's an issue that the leaders admit is there, but no sanctions.
Well, that's the difficulty that we have with parliamentary practice, because the assumption is that every member of parliament, I mean, is supposed to be, with the greatest respect and lack of better word, honorable. So you will not need to have a cane and standing at the entrance and whipping members to do what is right. That's why even our own constitution and our standing orders, I mean, gives so much room. For example, it says that if you absent yourself continuously for 15 sitting days without an excuse, before you can be brought to book. I mean, that's send you to privileges for some sanctions to happen. So you have members who are very tactical, who come to the house and then miss 10 sitting days, then come for a day or two, then go back to the absenteeism. And it's so difficult. Because remember, we are dealing with colleagues. I mean, Parliament is not just like with the greatest of multimedia, where you have a manager, you have an HR manager, you have people who can discipline others. We are like a class group where you have a class prefect. So we don't have like a headmaster kind of thing in Parliament. So we as whips are supposed to be in charge of discipline. And I can tell you, it's so much hell that to the extent that sometimes you get in your effort to get your colleagues to do the right thing, sometimes you get some even insult you. And there's nothing you can do about it because you are just a class prefect. And I mean, you've sat in class or either class prefect or class rep, as you may call it at the university and what have you. You are really disabled. And one of the things that I have advocated, I mean, since when I was even majority whip, was for us to have a biometric system in the chamber that allows each and everyone to log in from his desk and then log out. And automatically that gives the timing. And it takes away all argument because it is biometric. If I'm not there, I cannot get somebody to do it. And I said it was a lot of pain that Evans, that to the extent that some members will not be in the house and still will have others sign their name for them. I mean, it's so ridiculous.
But that clearly is a violation of privilege.
But you see, the sad thing is that when you call in for the register, because
which is what you use, which is the evidence you use.
I mean, there are several rulings. For example, the late Peter Adete said that signing at the maid's room is not enough evidence that you've been in the house. It has to be in the chamber. And in the chamber, usually we don't sign. It is your presence that is recorded by the, the officer. Recently, we've tried to see, can members sign? And, you know, one thing I can tell you, some who are deliberate will not even sign the book in the chamber, and they say, you saw me made a comment. I even spoke here. So that becomes about when we have a biometric system that we say we are going to use that, and every month, for example, my view, if we finally establish our ethics committee and we make it as part of our rules, if you do not have this number of hours in the month, you get this deduction of salary, and beyond that, ABCD can happen. I think that may be the way to be able to help us to go. But let me say, what is causing all this? The real cause of all this is, with the greatest of respect, our constituents and what they look up to from MPs. Because I can tell you, the recent primaries that we've had, in the case of the NDC, I mean, largely far better. Because only 9 members, I mean, I really wish every one of them came back. 9 members lost their seats. In the case of our colleagues in the majority, 42. Out of these 42, shockingly, some of the MPs that spend a lot of time in the chamber, they are dedicated, they are committed to their work, they are chairs of a committee, they are always around to chair committee meetings, to prepare report. They are those who lost. And I ask, so what are our constituents looking up from us?
Is it because they've been bought by those who, of course, can wield the most resources? Is it a case of the member of parliament going to the highest bidder?
That is something that all of us have been battling with. We've all been talking about it. I mean, I've heard the morning show on your very network where you were interviewing special assistants and sometimes even the candidate themselves, and the admittance of paying monies. And you don't see the electoral commission interested in anything, or the police interested in anything, or the CID interested in anything. Look, I had a colleague, and you can ask the defense minister, because he was a member of his committee in Pan-African Parliament in Zambia. All he did was donated, I think, cement to a church, and it was worth, I think, $500. That 500 to a church, not individual. That got him removed from the Zambian parliament.
Yeah, but here
in Ghana, all of us sit and we just talk about it, and nothing happens.
Here's the question. You just made the point about we talk and nothing happens. Today, yourself, Chairman Sabunsu, who is a cabinet minister and a minister of parliamentary affairs and minority leader, have all been complaining again. Nothing is going to happen. Something has to change at the parliament itself. When you start sanctioning them, then of course you could now expect others to do same at the elections and primary level.
Because in our case, our parliamentary rules check the constitution, check the standing orders. It doesn't say if a member absent himself for 2-3 days, it attracts any punishment. But in the case of the Political Party Act, the Political Party Act, it talks about how much you can pay, how much you can receive.
Unfortunately, the blank there is that it doesn't regulate internal party primaries. These national elections, yes. But
that's where I disagree with the interpretation.
Exactly.
I keep saying that when it talks about election, in my view, you only be trying to run away from responsibility if you say, oh, it's talking about the national election. Because how do you get to a national election if you don't go through a primaries? So for me, they are all together. The internal primaries is what leads to the national election.
For the sake of time, let me ask you a direct question. I mean, if out of 275 members of parliament, you can count more than 100 who actually do the work, and your colleague, my leader, says when it comes to actual legislation, he can't even count 10. Is parliament fit for purpose?
Well, Evans, to be very frank with you, yes, Parliament has a big role to play in our democracy. Is it doing it well is another thing. Because, for example, how will you pass laws if we don't have Parliament? How will you approve budgets if we don't have Parliament? Are we oversighting very well? That is a question. Are we really debating issues very well in the House? That is another question. Are we really holding ourselves to check? That's another issue. And that's why I keep saying that we've taken steps. I mean, we've taken steps. We are hoping that by the close of this Parliament, we will have the new standing orders. That in it, we have the Ethics Committee, which we've done some code of conduct document that is there. We need to really strengthen it so that we'll be able to implement it fully. Some actions have been there, but we are saying that, look, it will be much, much easier if the two major political parties come together and look at the process of selecting people to come to Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful, Muntaka Mubarak, for that. This is a conversation that is still pretty relevant with some of the confessions we've heard today by the leadership of the House on both sides, really. Newsnight starts right now.